and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on with regards to the upcoming general elections in the country. A lot of political developments going on prior to that, and now we also know that, of course, while we talk about the preparations of elections, there seems to be some problems that certain political parties seem to have with regards to the other. We also know that the PMLN has accused the PTI of a delay in the general elections with regards to the petition that was filed in the Lahore High Court with reference to the ROs being part of the electoral process. And this is something that, of course, is being questioned by the PTI in terms of whether or not there's going to be any sort of transparency to the caretaker setup and to the people involved from the caretaker setup, and to bring them on board as ROs or DROs in the process. And this is something that the PMLN President Shehbaz Sharif has pointed out as something that already happened in 2018 and just seems to be an excuse by the PTI to delay the elections and nothing more. And simultaneously, while there is a call for elections, the PTI also is engaging in such measures which is contradictory and which shows their true objective, which is to delay the election. This, of course, is the PMLN stance on the issue, but we're going to be taking a look at what does this mean on ground in terms of what the Lahore High Court has also called for, and the notification that has resulted in the ECP also stopping the trainings of the DROs and ROs that were already appointed and was continuing in different parts of the country. And what does this mean in terms of moving ahead, and what sort of legal options exist now as we proceed further, and what really is the issue when we talk about the caretaker setup's involvement in this entire process as well, since of course this is not going to be something extraordinary in terms of elections being held by a caretaker setup. So we're going to be trying and understanding what is going on, the legalities of that, and then of course the political motivations behind certain actions. That is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at the Prime Minister's visit to Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and he's there on a two-day visit expressing solidarity with the people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and of course with the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir as well, in the aftermath of the decision by the Indian Supreme Court that has upheld the Indian government's earlier decision of the unilateral actions that took away the special status of the occupied territory, and with regards to, of course, Article 370 and 35A, what was the constitutional and the international right of the people of the occupied territory. Something, of course, that was in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, was unilateral in nature, and something that Pakistan has vehemently opposed to since then. However, we see now that the judicial system of India has also sanctioned the illegal move by the government, and so of course, this puts us into a position where we need to talk about this way more and raise that on a different platform and see what now exists as our options to do further. And the Prime Minister, in his visit, has reiterated Pakistan's stance on this matter and has vowed to extend diplomatic, political, and moral support to the people of Kashmir, as Pakistan has always done so. So we're going to be taking a bit of an understanding of what exactly is it that his visit is going to transpire into, and what more Pakistan can do in this regard to prevent the kind of illegal actions that have been taken, and also those that have been announced for next year, including elections in the occupied territory in September 2024. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal. We haven't been joined today by Farooq Badawi, but we have another guest in the studio with us, Salahuddin Safdar, spokesperson Falcon. Thank you very much, Safdar, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And we've been joined online by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for being part of the discussion as well. And I'll start with you, Salahuddin Saab, given the fact that when we take a look at what is going on, I want to first understand, before we move on to what the political parties are saying, what the judicial system has decided, and what the ECP is doing, what exactly is on ground in terms of the provisions provided, the problem here that we're discussing. When we talk about a caretaker setup and elections happening within the caretaker setup in the country, is this something fundamentally wrong to get to the ROs or ROs from the bureaucracy? Is this something that causes a problem to the credibility or transparency to the electoral process, or is something that the ECP is restricted to do?
Thank you, Sana. Before coming to the specifically answering your question, I would like to shed some light on the context of the appointment of returning officers and district returning officers in Pakistan, how the law and the practice has evolved in this specific area. The Constitution of 1973 has this article 220 that specifically says that the executive authorities shall assist the Election Commission in discharge of its duties. In the spirit of this constitution, the earlier election law, the Representation of Peoples Act 1976, had this provision that the district returning officers and the returning officers will be the government officials. So these earlier there was no specific provision, there was no separation of judiciary and executive in Pakistan when the constitution was promulgated in 1973. The separation process took a long time, and it completed sometime in late 90s when the judiciary was completely separated from the executive. So back then taking returning officers and district returning officers from the judiciary was not so much in contradiction with the law and or the constitution. But after that, from 2000 elections of 2002 onwards till 2013, the practice of taking judicial officers as election officials was something that is that may be described as mild as illegal. And the FAFN has been raising this issue since that time. Before the election of 2013, we explicitly and categorically said that the judiciary should be disengaged because the law at that time did not mandate the appointment of judicial officers as the election officials. However, when we made this Elections Act 2017, that Elections Act 2017 allowed the appointment of judicial officers as the election officials. However, still the main department, the main authorities that are constitutionally bound to assist the Election Commission are the executive authorities. So it is very much in the spirit of law that the Election Commission appoints these officers from the executive authorities, from the government officials. Having said that, I think it is also very pertinent to note that the elections are more an administrative exercise than a judicial exercise. So officers coming from administration are likely to better manage the elections than at least in principle than the judicial officers. And then this is also against this is also a conflict of interest situation for the judiciary, because these officials coming from the judiciary are conducting the election, and then the same judiciary is giving officials to the tribunals who will be hearing the petitions against the actions conducted by the same judicial officers. So this is a conflict of interest situation for judiciary as well. And again, then there is the expanse of election exercise in Pakistan is very broad now. We need somewhere around 1700 actually more than 2000 officials to be appointed on the election duties for the upcoming election. So for our judiciary, the total strength of our subordinate judiciary lies somewhere between 4000 and 5000. So if we take out roughly more than a quarter of these officials to the election duties, the performance of judiciary obviously will be affected. So given these circumstances, and then the refusal or the refusal of the Chief Justices of the High Court to provide the judicial officers provided the ground for the Election Commission to appoint these officials from the executive authorities, from the government. So that is the context in which this decision was made. So I think the legal and administrative part of this issue is very clear. I will leave the political part for Faisal Saab or other participants to comment on, but I think this is very clear that the appointing officers from the executive authorities is not only legal, but it is in line with the constitution spirit. So that is what the Election Commission had done.
Sure. So why exactly do you think that this has been suspended?
I think that's the political reason, and I think it is very pertinent to note that all of our institutions, our state institutions, credibility has been put on stake. over the at least in the last 1 year, and the judiciary's judicial activism of taking such petitions at such short notice and at such particular time even give more credence to the allegations of it being not not non-partisan. So that's the situation.
So you think that the petition shouldn't have been heard altogether? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying the petition should not have been heard, but I'm questioning the timing of hearing the petition. Why the decision is coming on the day when the Election Commission is likely to announce the election schedule? Why did this this decision did not come earlier? So that's important. That is something
right.
that gives no room for Election Commission. It gives very little room to the Election Commission to plan things ahead accordingly and be able to hold the election timely on the announced date.
Absolutely right. Let me also get Dr. Niaz's opinion on this, especially with regards to the politics involved in all of this. And we know, of course, that the PMLN has outrightly accused the PTI of a tactic of delaying elections. But of course, this entire move just doesn't involve only a certain political party. It's also, of course, as we were discussing, involves the judicial process and the Lahore High Court, and of course, what is going to now transpire and how this entire system is working. And if we are to establish that it is legal to get DROs and DROs from the bureaucracy and the executive, then the reasons in terms of political implications of the actions of what is going on become all the more important to discuss. In your opinion, Dr. Niaz, do you think that all of this is also clearly boiling down to political motivations?
Well, yeah, I think you just have to look at, the whole background, the context in which all of it is appearing. And that's related to, the extreme degree of, political volatility, the polarization in the country over, almost 2 years now, since, the issue of the no confidence vote emerged towards the end of 2021. So it's almost 2 years now that we've had this extreme polarization, and this, polarization has, made every institution in Pakistan vulnerable, and one party or the other has objections to almost every institution. Now you need thousands and thousands of people to perform these duties on election day. And if you look at the pools that are available, you have either the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the educational staff, or finally the army staff. And one party or the other will invariably have some objection or the other to each of these groups. So then it leaves the question of whom we can trust, because all of them are pulled out of the same society, which is extremely polarized and where suspicions abound. But I think the basic thing is that given all the delays that we've had in elections, the elections should have been held months ago, and especially the provincial ones more than a year ago. I think at least these issues should have been decided. The Election Commission of Pakistan should have brought all the political parties together and at least decided these basic issues of how the elections are going to be held. And now, after much delay, now that we have all the constituencies and the delimitations done, the funding released, there were issues with both these matters as well. And now suddenly this new issue has come up, and it's hard to say how it's going to get resolved. But I think it's important that the Lahore High Court hears this issue on a daily basis and comes to a decision very quickly, so that there are no further delays. Ultimately, I think there will have to be some element of trust, because there are officials from each party that sit in each booth, in each election place, and they monitor things very, very carefully. There are the neutral election observers from FAFN. There's the media there. So ultimately, we have to trust there and come to a quick decision about these things and move on, so that elections don't get delayed further.
Right. Faisal, when we look at the situation, then it seems that even previously We've seen in the country that there is a lot of blame game in terms of whatever action is taken of one political party on the other, and whatever action is taken is talked about in light of an ulterior motive or something or the other that reflects poorly on our own electoral process. And while we talk about a substantial, free and fair election that needs to happen in a proper and efficient way, it seems that all of this always gets in the middle. At the same time, of course, there are important issues that need to be deconstructed and that need to have light shed on them for us to understand if there is anything that's happening in the procedure. But in all of this mix, do you see that when we talk about the input of the different political parties, whoever it is at the moment, and the way that our electoral process is carrying forward, that these two are aligned in any way, or that one is actually happening to complement or support the other, and not that these are two separate stories that are running in parallel and barely have any impact on each other?
Yes, Sana, if we obviously talk about the elections obviously they take place with the help of different institutions, and of course them institutions, they belong to state is run by different institutions. And if we talk about the elections, the coming up elections, obviously the institutions that are supposed to help out election commission in the process, whether it be the whole process or it be the security of the election campaign and election itself, then I think it is very odd of a few of the political parties to raise these kind of questions. Where were these parties when the last year's by-elections took place? If we talk about the last year's by-election, I mean the very party PTI I'm talking about, it secured more than 2/3 seats of that by-election, and I think at that time they did not say anything about it. But of course now we are seeing that their applications are being taken up. I think political parties, they must understand that every institution which we are talking about, people who are serving Pakistan, they are serving Pakistan at their best, and whatever they are assigned in terms of duty, in terms of service to people of Pakistan, they will carry out at their best. And raising questions about their biasness or non-biasness, that should not be there. And to me, I think it is good that another party, prominent party, PMLN, has actually came up with this narrative that of course PTI is trying to delay the elections. Delay should not be there. And
so you agree with the PMLN stance that this is a delaying tactic?
Oh, very much, I must say. And
so that means that you're also saying that the judiciary is involved?
No, judiciary is not involved. Judiciary is not involved, but I'm saying that.
How exactly is it a delaying tactic then?
It is a delaying tactic in terms that, of course, if we talk about PTI is maybe not ready for the election at this hour, and I think it's an ample opportunity for PMLN and other parties as well to talk about it and to highlight this issue, that this is the hour that the rest of all the parties, of course, they are ready for the elections. If one party is just raising these sort of questions at this hour, they should not be heard. They should not be heard, and the process of election should not be delayed. And of course, PTI as a party should be participating in the election, and it should be allowed to participate in the elections with the full might. And election should never be delayed at this hour. And I am agreeing with, and it is very because normally I abstain from agreeing with PMLN, but in this hour I agree with PMLN. I am up for them that the election should take place in time, and there shouldn't be any delay just because of these reasons, that one institution is quite likable for a single party, and the other ones, they are not likable. So I think at this hour election should proceed with the precise date which was announced earlier by ECP.
I want to explore a little bit more about what is being discussed in terms of the judiciary's involvement. And Dr. Niaz, I want your take on this as well in terms of when we talk about the involvement of the judiciary in whether or not they should hear these petitions or not. We can if we go with the premise that this is a delaying tactic and it's going with it's built on the motivation of the kind of political objective that exists, I want to then understand that if we don't say that the judiciary is accomplice, then we are saying that they shouldn't be hearing these petitions at this time. But do you think that that is also something which is the credible or the appropriate response by the judiciary at the moment when we talk about these petitions? Is this something that is very obvious, legally speaking, that should not have been done?
Well, there are several reasons why the judiciary should not get involved in, election matters. One of first reason is that it takes them away from their primary duty, which is to hear ongoing cases. Then the second thing is it tends to put the judiciary under the limelight, and all kind of accusations can come in an extremely politicized environment. And then the third reason is, of course, then that later on they also have to head the election tribunals. So there are good reasons for
Right,
keeping
but
this.
Dr. Niaz, don't these reasons also apply in the case that they don't hear such petitions?
Well, the hearing of the petition is, of course, a judicial matter, and it doesn't get them involved in the nitty-gritty of the elections. So there's no conflict of interest, because if they are presiding officers and then there are judicial officers, then there is a conflict of interest that they are going to review their own performances in a way. So I think it's a good idea to have a division of labor and look at other large pool of government officials that may be available, which is, of course, the bureaucracy. Then the teachers are another good pool. But again, I think all of these things should have been sorted out much earlier. And if it's come down to so late, then I think there's a need to have hearing on an everyday basis, so that there is no delay. Obviously, if the Lahore High Court Commission, the Lahore High Court has given the stay order, it must have seen some good reasons in the petition. Regarding whether the PTI is doing it just to delay the elections, I'm not sure. I think the PTI is one party which has been pushing hardest to have elections on time, and it were the other parties, especially PMLN and the establishment, etc., the caretaker government, which were interested in delaying things. So it's an unusual step, and there are other reasons that one can identify for PTI doing so, given the fact that it's facing so much pressure from various sectors, which is affecting its ability to campaign, and it's under so much duress and pressure already. And if it feels that the bureaucracy may also be against it, then I think it has a valid reason to bring up these issues. So what's important is that it should be sorted out quickly enough.
Right. So the context that we established earlier was that the way that we want to incorporate the executive or the bureaucracy into this process is not only legal, it's necessary. But I also want to understand in a more broader context when we talk about political affiliations or conflict of interest, as Dr. Niaz was also mentioning, and understand that there may be limitations to this, but how much of that can even then be catered to when we talk about people being involved in terms of the numbers that we're saying. So there are thousands of people that are going to be part of this process. All of them will have some sort of political affiliation or the other. And then there's, of course, where they belong, if they're part of the bureaucracy or the caretaker setup, and who is it that they have alliances with, and all of that to be involved. How much then will you be able to limit or minimize the possible biasness that can emerge from the inclusion of these individuals? Because at the end of the day, you need to have individuals, and all of them have some sort of baggage.
Sana, if we read the order of Lahore High Court, it does not specifically talk about the merits of appointing executive authorities on the as the election officials. Rather, it is more about the level playing field. So that's the main concern of
but is
political parties as well.
Is that not what the petitioner has raised? Is that not the question the
That's the
petitioner has
question
raised?
that
Yes.
petitioner has raised, but the order, in the order, the judge has not argued very much on the legal merits of whether or not constitution or the law allows appointing the authorities. Rather, the judge has raised this question of perceived issue of level playing field
Okay.
for the elections, and on that basis the Judge Sahab has asked the Chief Justice of the High Court to appoint a larger bench to discuss the constitutionality and the legality of the matter. So that remains a question. But having said that, the Elections Act 2017 has wide-ranging powers for the Election Commission for superintendents and the control over the election officials. So any official coming from the judiciary or from the executive will come under the direct superintendence of the Election Commission. He or she will have to abide by the directions issued by the Election Commission, and the Election Commission can punish them for corrupt practices or illegal practices if they commit any. And we have seen Election Commission exercising these powers in the case of Daska by-election. If you remember, the Election Commission initiated a disciplinary action against the presiding officers who went missing, and action was taken. They were punitive action was taken against them that were later stayed by the court. So that by law the commission has all the powers to ensure that the elections are held in free and fair manner. So as we have been discussing in previous programs, the commission should be seen exercising these powers extensively to ensure that the concerns of all political parties about the level playing fields are addressed. And then there's also this situation regarding the appointment of returning officers and district returning officers, in which the commission will be using a large number of people coming from various departments. So not necessarily all of them will be in the control of one government or another government. They'll be coming from the various governments, and the Election Commission will have more powers to control them, to exercise its role as an savior or as a
Right.
conductor of the elections.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Niaz, there's also the question of when we talk about the credibility of institutions, and not just the judiciary or this particular matter. There's also, of course, the kind of voices that are being raised against other institutions as well, including NAB, for example, which is something that the PPP also keeps referring to, and of course the judiciary and others as well, with regards to what is going on in the electoral process. We've also seen the PPP blatantly talk about the PMLN being favorites and having affiliations with certain quarters or the other, and to have a more credible system of voting in these elections. And so while we talk about all of these matters, and while it's important, of course, to ensure that the institutions are respected of their own jurisdictions, how is it then that the process of one political party pointing fingers at a certain institution or another political party helping the case at the moment, and who is it that we are going to believe when we talk about what Safdar Saab also mentioned as perceived level playing field? Because if it's a matter of perception, then there's so much that's going on in the world of perception that is perhaps different from what really is the situation. We have one day one political party saying one thing against NAB or judiciary, for example, and then the other comes in and says the same things, and there are similar actions happening. And so you don't really understand if that's actually a problem with the institution, or is it just the way that we have a cyclical way of things happening?
Well, it's just because of, the extremely, polarized environment that we've had for the last several months, with, every institution, every political party locking horns with each other on just so many issues. I don't remember such a politically charged election for several decades, uh, even 2018 had a lot of controversies, but there were not so many issues right till the last moment. We had elections on time, and things were much more smooth. But this election is just become so highly contested even before the contest is held. So it's just very difficult to find institutions, pools, which will meet with the acceptability of every political party, and one can be sure whoever is appointed, whether it's the judiciary, the executive, teachers, the army, everybody will come out looking bad from the exercise. And once the elections are over, there'll be so many accusations. So the judiciary is the arbiter right now, but the judiciary itself has become so scandalized, politicized, and lost trust of so many parties, that even the judiciary is unable to play the role of the neutral arbiter. So maybe it's for the election commission to bring all the political parties together, and try to listen to them, and have them develop a consensus on how to move forward. The judicial process is there, but then if political parties can resolve these issues, that's much better than judiciary playing the role of the empire and getting caught in all the politics itself. So somebody has to take the initiative. If the Election Commission of Pakistan can do that, I think that will be the best way forward.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. So, my last question to you with reference to this is, what now is there in terms of moving ahead, and what possibilities exist both within judiciary of moving forward, and what the ECP can do in this regard, or what other political parties such as the PMLN, who seem to be accusing PTI for this, can do to stop it if they think this is something as a delaying tactic?
I think, Sana, political parties should be allowed to do politics. We should not call names for doing them doing politics. Instead, the political process, the due legal process should take its course. We have examples of countries who have gone to elections 5 times in 2 or 3 years. Only because there was no political consensus, there was no government making up as a result of elections, so they didn't bother. They held another election, and they held then again held another election. So they repeated the process. They did not deviate from the process. So not deviating from the due process is important. What we should be doing, what Election Commission should be doing, what political parties should be doing, what judiciary should be doing, is ensuring that nobody deviates from the due process as mentioned in the law and in the Constitution. If we stick to the process, I think we'll find a way out of all of our crisis. If we deviate from the process, due process, we'll find ourselves fixed in another crisis again. So that's important, and that is where I will stop here.
Yes,
All right.
Sana, very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, Sana, I just wanted to highlight earlier of obviously Salahuddin Saab, very professionally highlighted what Constitution says about it. And to me, I think when we talk about the neutral umpires, obviously PTI always highlights this aspect. In this whole election, of course, umpires are going to be the umpires that always used to be, in accordance with the Constitution. But when it comes to third umpires, of course, judiciary would always play a role of a third umpire. If somebody has any sort of allegations against a single party or more parties than that, or even a certain institution, then of course they can go towards the our judiciary, and judiciary will play the third umpire's role.
Right. Thank you, Faisal, for that. And thank you, Salahuddin Safdar, for joining us and being part of the debate. We're now going to be moving on to our next segment, which is going to focus on Prime Minister's visit to Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and of course, showing solidarity to the people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and the Indian occupied Kashmir as well. Of course, in light of what has happened with the Indian Supreme Court, also upholding the decision of the Indian government with regards to abrogation of the unilateral status of Kashmir, and this is something that happened back in 2019, but has also gotten the judicial sanction now, which of course Pakistan is going to be protesting against, and will be raising this on various platforms internationally as well. We're going to first hear what the PM had to say and discuss more on this.
India's unilateral and illegal measure of 5th August 2019 and a series of subsequent steps have been aimed at changing the demographic structure and political landscape of the Indian illegal occupied Jammu and Kashmir. These measures constitute a flagrant violation of international law as well as the UN Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Supreme Court's verdict are mere tools to consolidate its occupation. Domestic legislation and judicial verdicts cannot absolve India of its international obligations under the UN Security Council resolutions. In the eyes of international law, any process subservient to the Indian Constitution cannot be invoked to determine the final status of Jammu and Kashmir.
Well, you heard what the Prime Minister had to say, and we discussed this earlier as well, Faisal, and it was pretty obvious and clear to everyone that the status of Kashmir cannot be changed just because the Indian government decided one day to do that, or that the Indian Supreme Court has also sanctioned it. But at the same time, it does cause problems for the people of the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir because of the kind of avenues it opens up for the occupied forces and the government of India to move on with more draconian laws, to move on with more inhumane practices and human rights violations, which still continue and have been continuing since many decades now. And even though we have raised our voice against this decision back in 2019, we still know that so many years have passed and nothing really has happened. So what are we going to do about it now, and how different are the results going to be?
Yes, Sana, obviously, first of all, the fact that our Prime Minister of Pakistan, was standing in Azad Kashmir's Legislative Assembly today. In the Legislative Assembly, of course, not only the legislature, the members of this assembly are from Azad Kashmir itself, but from the across the border as well, people who have migrated from the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir for years and years. Obviously, people who were forced to leave their homes, their villages, their cities, just because of one reason, that the brute force of Indian military was used against them, and their representatives, they were there as well, and the names were highlighted of the leadership of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the leaders who are the voice of their people, the Kashmiri people, and their names were taken obviously in this Legislative Assembly as well by our Prime Minister. And I think our Prime Minister standing there today to reiterate the solidarity with the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir was important at this hour, because earlier this week we saw that the Indian Supreme Court it actually upheld the previous decision, and of course they have cemented their illegal action which was taken by them, knowing the facts that internationally, of course, this issue is a bilateral issue, and internationally, of course, we know that United Nations Resolution 47 speaks loud that the plebiscite is the only solution, because it is a conflict between both of the countries, and of course people of Kashmir are suffering. It was key at this hour that our Prime Minister, he reiterated the facts for the world to know that the solution is yet to be achieved in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. No matter what happens, no matter what the designs are presented by BJP, which is backed by Hindutva ideology, by RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which is a hate-filled, which is a racist ideology against the Muslims of India, as well as the Muslims of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So it was important day for Kashmir today, and of course the world needs to look at the facts once more, and I think it was quite an important visit by our Prime Minister today.
Right, and Faisal, we also know that there was also a decision earlier in the aftermath of the Supreme Court ruling of India that Pakistan is going to be bringing in all the different stakeholders, and our caretaker foreign minister was also speaking about this and said that we're going to be involving all the relevant stakeholders, including those of the OIC countries, and apprising them of the situation, and then making sure that this is something that we put forward in the strongest terms. And I want to then understand that while we have these Security Council resolutions in place, and while we are raising our voices against this, is there certain avenues that are not yet explored, and how much further can political and diplomatic channels result in something substantial for the people of Kashmir?
Sana, time and again in our program we have highlighted that why the Western voices, the most powerful voices of the world, they are silent on this. Of course, their government, they have been standing so far with India for their own, obviously, political and economic ambitions, which they see that India is having more worth in the region rather than anyone else. So I believe.
But it seems, Faisal, that when we take a look at instances with what has happened with the US and Canada, that when it comes to them, they are able to show certain consequence, and that in those instances, these relationships have taken a backseat.
You are right about it, but this is the hour that Pakistan must do, which has been done previously by Pakistan, but Pakistan must do it once more, because this time around, of course, Pakistan's voices will be heard. One aspect which needs to be further highlighted is the fact that after the abrogation of 370 and 35A, we saw a pattern of Indian regime in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, in which what they have done is that they obviously their assembly, which was of course they were having an assembly in there, they disbanded it, and what they did was that they increased the forces out there. I mean, if we talk about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, it is most militarized zone in the world today, and I think we need to highlight it further. And if we talk about India treating its minorities today, of course it is an open fact which needs to be highlighted once more by Pakistan and all of the relevant organizations, so that more pressure can be put on India, because Sana, time and again we have highlighted in past, and let me do it once more, that it is not only matter of 10 million Kashmiris, but it is a matter of people of India and people of Pakistan as well, because
Absolutely.
we are talking about a conflict between both of the countries. If we talk about India and Pakistan, both of them, they have nukes, and the world should be obviously clear on this, that what stance they want to have for a peaceful world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Faisal, for that. And we really hope that we're able to do that, and that the world also realizes what is going on, what has been going on for so long, and how violations of international law and UN Security Council resolutions are not to be taken lightly, and that actions taken which are illegal cannot be sanctioned by the judicial system of a country. And if so, there needs to be a consequence. That's all we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.